Medieval knights are normally pictured wearing heavy armor, charging into battle with their swords drawn. But what did knights really do? And why is it that they're always wearing those big, cumbersome helmets? Today, let's dive in and see what we discover. If you've ever seen any pictures or even movies about medieval knights, you'll see that they usually wear these big white helmets with a neck guard that looks like a turtle shell. You may have also noticed that most of them seem to have a pointy top. So why were these helmets designed this way? And how did they help the knights while fighting? The helmet that we're discussing is called a bassinet. Bascinets first appeared around the 14th century and stayed in style until the 16th century, when they were eventually replaced by the cervellier, which was much lighter. Before bascinets were used, knights would wear different types of helmets depending on their role in battle. Some had large visors to protect their faces from incoming blows, while others had no luck at all. Eventually, the simple but effective bassinet came into style. This type of helmet provided great protection and became the main helmet design for hundreds of years. Now, let's talk about the shape. Why did they make the tops of the helmets so pointy? Well, there are several theories about this. One theory is that the pointy top was designed so that if a knight was knocked off his horse, the point would prevent him from impaling himself on the ground. If he landed on his back, that is. In reality, this is not very likely to happen because knights would usually try to protect themselves by putting their arms out in front of them if they were about to fall. Also, during combat, knights were often knocked off their horses, so it makes sense that they needed some sort of protection against dangerous landing. However, this is just one theory, and it's not backed up by any evidence. It's possible that it could be true, though. Another reason is that the pointed top provided more protection from incoming attacks. Since the tip of the helmet was higher than the rest of it, it was less likely to be hit by an opponent's weapon. This means that the knight inside was much safer. There is some truth to this. For example, long pointy helmets like the one we're talking about today were worn during the Crusades. They were referred to as the tower helmet and were said to be able to deflect mace blows without letting the knight inside get stunned. That being said, there is little evidence that pointy helmets were superior to round ones. Round helmets were used for centuries and were very effective at protecting knights, so it's hard to say if the pointy top was actually necessary. A third reason is that the pointy top made it harder for an opponent to grab onto the knight's helmet while fighting. If someone tried to grab onto the helmet and pull the knight off balance, the point would make it difficult for them to maintain their grip. This would allow the knight to keep fighting effectively. However, it's unlikely that this was the main reason for the design of the bassinet. Most accounts of medieval combat state that knights were more concerned with protecting their bodies than their heads. So it's possible that the pointy top was just a byproduct of other design choices. So why did they use these helmets? Well, the answer is simple. They offered excellent protection. Unlike chainmail, helmets could be made of metal plates that overlapped each other. This made them much stronger and less likely to be ripped or torn. Metal helmets could also be reinforced with leather or cloth to further improve their protection. These materials were softer than metal, so they helped to distribute the force of incoming blows more evenly across the helmet. This made it much less likely that a knight would be stunned or killed by a blow to the head. And let's not forget about the iconic neck guard, also known as a cervellier or a faltold. The cervellier was originally a separate piece of equipment that was worn around the neck to protect the vulnerable jugular area. However, over time, it became attached to the helmet. This was probably done to make it easier for the knight to put on his armor. The cervellier was also useful for protecting the back of the neck, which was another vulnerable area for knights. Overall, the cervellier was an important addition to the knight's helmet because it provided much-needed protection for his head and neck. There are two main reasons why knights wore such big helmets. The first reason is that it was necessary to provide adequate protection for the knight's head and neck. Helmets could be made of metal plates that overlapped each other, making them much stronger than chainmail. This allowed knights to fight more effectively in battle because they knew that their heads were safe. The second reason is that the larger size of the helmet allowed for more space inside. This was important because it gave the knight more room to move his head and face around. This was especially important during combat when the knight needed to be able to see and react quickly to what was going on around him. It's important to note that not all knights wore large helmets. In fact, the size and style of the helmet varied depending on the time period and the region. However, overall, the trend was towards larger helmets that provided more protection. This was due to the increasing use of gunpowder weapons, which required knights to wear heavier armor to protect themselves. In conclusion, medieval knights wore large helmets for two main reasons. First, it allowed for better protection of the head and neck. Second, it allowed for more freedom of movement. While the pointy top of some helmets may have been useful for certain situations, it was not the primary reason for the design of the bassinet or other medieval helmets. Instead, the focus was on providing as much protection as possible, while still allowing the knight to fight effectively. What did you think about this video? Did you learn something new? What else would you like to learn about medieval knights? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and come back soon for more exciting content.